Welcome to the Diesel Podcast presented by DFC Diesel. Matt, welcome back to the Diesel Podcast. How's your summer been?
It's going by pretty fast. It
That's a,
I don't know, it's like seems like all the last couple of years, or whatever, going by really quick about this time.
they are, yeah. It's flying by, and it seems like some of these new model. Well, they're not new model trucks now, but they still feel kind of new to me. Like 2019, 2020 Rams and Power Strokes, and just all different trucks out there. I'm like, now they're starting to get to like the second owners. And then those people are looking to do upgrades to them, or they're asking questions. I get that a lot. I think kind of this whole year is somebody picking up a truck that's 4 or 5 years old, and then they want to know, hey, what should I look for? What can be some issues? Or I have this plan in mind to make like this ultimate tow rig. What should I look out for weak points? So I thought it'd be cool to chat with you about the 6.7 Cummins and like the 2019 and ups for those people that are into them, or maybe they're just out of warranty now and they're like, hey, I wanna do something to this truck. What kind of things do you see as it pertains to the engine with those trucks, or new developments that you guys have for them?
Yeah, so we've been kind of delaying our launch date of the 2019 up for a little bit. We've been building them for probably about the last 2 years or so, but we've been doing a lot more of kind of a hybrid conversion to them. Because there, you know, I know there's starting to be some aftermarket upgrades in terms of like a lot of the lifter failures and stuff happening. And you know, up until now, the reason why we're delaying is we want to find what's going to be a good alternative fix for some of the lifter issues and other issues we're seeing in the 19 amp Cummins. So previously we're just kind of selling a hybrid version where we'd convert over like the front cover and the front gear train and stuff and put it on an older 18 and down Cummins. Which I know I think a lot of other companies have done as well. But we're pretty much ready to release our version of the 19 and up. Where the nice part is I mean there's still some pretty common architecture between the older ones and the newer ones. I mean, the block is different and crank and head and everything else, like it doesn't directly cross over, but the nice part is we can take a lot of things we've learned on the older 6.7 and apply them to the newer one and have a lot better success out of the gate.
I think that's a really interesting topic to maybe spend a little bit of time on. I had a listener earlier this year. He messaged into us, and he had a really it was a long, detailed message. He has one of those trucks. I don't remember if it's a 2020 or 2019. But he said, is this lifter issue overblown? Because I've never had an issue. I have a couple coworkers that have them. We've never had issues. And from my perspective, any company or engine, anyone who deals with engines or performance, they've always mentioned that as an issue on these trucks.
Hmm.
How common is it? How big of a problem do you think it is?
I actually don't think it's that big of a problem. I would say the vast majority of the people that probably suffer an issue from it are the ones that are watching the recommended oil change schedule in the dash of the truck. Or else running like a poor grade of oil. I mean, I've never, of all the people that are, running these trucks and are high mileage, I mean, a very consistent thing amongst all of them that haven't had problems is they just do regular servicing and maintenance. Like I know oftentimes we talk about a lot of other platforms and stuff, and everyone's looking for, well, what are upgrades I can do? What are things that can make it be more reliable and everything else? And it's like the underlying principle for all engines, like all the diesels and everything is just, regular consistent maintenance really, and good quality oils and filters and everything. And every time you different, I guess you could kind of say it's like different engines are more forgiving to extended oil intervals than other ones. Like not to switch subjects, but like, a 6.4 engine, for example, is very unforgiving to extended service intervals. And, Cummins in general are usually pretty good, but, they introduced a hydraulic roller lifter in the newer Cummins, and there's a couple little challenges with them, like, the, um, as opposed to some of like the Ford and Chevy engines that have like a lot better kind of retainer design for keeping the rollers square over the camshaft. I mean, the Cummins ones just have like a kind of a little locating tab on them, and there's a little bit of slop in the block and stuff. And then, it again, like the ones, if the roller's prematurely failing or the hydraulic valving is failing on, it's usually just because like, you have more oil contamination, sludge buildup, fuel dilution, so on and so forth. That's causing the issue. But I think the reason why so many people hear about it is because like I think Cummins went like what 50 years or something, and lifter failure was not an issue for the whole time. And then to hear of any issues whatsoever in a newer model truck, especially something that's reasonably only 5 or 6 years old, I think that's just why it's like it caught people's attention a lot more. But I don't necessarily think it's a majorly widespread issue. But I think the challenge as a production injury manufacturer is, we're we can offer the best warranty we want, but I mean it's still reliant on how well, the customer services and takes care of their vehicle. And so whenever we come out with something that we want to release to the market, we're also trying to think like, how can we make it as good as we possibly can and avoid any potential warranty issues, period, whether they service it exactly to the recommended intervals or not. Like, how do we get the best chances of success, through as many different variables out there, right?
All right. That makes sense. I think because the typical, maybe not typical, but if you were to take just a number of, say, Cummins owners, you're going to have some that change it right down to the mile or the tenth of the mile. They're very detailed with their maintenance schedule. Others, maybe they can't. Maybe there's something with work or how they use the truck where they have to extend it a little bit. And then there's people that just don't take care of their trucks at all, and regardless of the brand or what happens. And trying to accommodate that would be really tough. And if I transition that from how common is the problem to, say, somebody does have it and they've had an engine failure, what approach did DFC Diesel take to be able to offer a solution when they're getting like a short or a long block?
So in all the over the last about 2 years or so, as we've been kind of building up our core bank and stuff, I mean, it's been nice because even though we've been selling these kind of hybrid conversions, we're able to get all these cores back and, start assessing and say like, well, what are the common failures? I mean, as much as everyone thinks that, the most common failure of these newer Cummins is like the hydraulic lifters, we actually still see more rod bearing failures than we do hydraulic lifter failures, like percentage wise in terms of the cores returned, which again can be directly related back to proper servicing and stuff. And people have to realize too that these engines are making more and more power and they're with the new variable geometry turbos, they're able to kind of keep the turbo spooled at lower and lower RPMs. And I mean, if you start lugging an engine at 1500 RPM, in like your sixth or eighth gear sort of thing, and, especially you've added extra power and stuff, I mean, that's putting enormous strain on those rod bearings, like where, you're not making sufficient oil pressure to maintain the wedge in between the bearing and the crankshaft. And so you start getting accelerated wear where it comes into contact with the crankshaft and everything. And that's just, accelerated that much more when you start getting, like as the fuel kind of emulsifies in the oil and it starts kind of collecting, get flushed out the next oil change. I mean, it's kind of still like little abrasive particles with all the, everything held in the oil. And so, I mean, those get larger than like, the micron level of oil wedge you have, maintaining, the in between the crankshaft and the bearing. And so when it comes into contact, it just, starts scratching at the bearing and stuff and prematurely wearing it out. So I'd say like a couple of things we've really focused on is taking, kind of like some, like what we've learned on the older Cummins. I mean, a big one is like, making sure like, as a PER, I mean, as if we are choosing to reuse an oil pump, did we properly qualify it and everything else and use new oil pumps where it's needed and stuff? You got to make sure that there's no vacuum or suction leaks or whatever in the pickup tube that could aerate the oil or anything and, potentially drop the oil pressure at all. Even when you're rebuilding the engine, I mean, you can have specs that vary from, 2 thou to 4 thou for bearing clearance. And it's like, well, it's kind of always a balance between, if you run the bearing clearances too tight, you can chew them up when it gets really, really hot and stuff. Likewise, if they're too loose, you can drop oil pressure more and not maintain that wedge and take them out just as easily. So, we're usually trying to aim for kind of a mid-spec area. And, and if we are running up higher on the spec, we've chosen just like, grind the crankshaft so we can properly adjust the bearing clearance. So it maintains sufficient oil pressure. And then the final thing is making sure, I think we've talked about before, is proper RA finish. I mean, um, too many too many machine shops and everything else out there. I mean, they've been doing this for, 20, 30 years and nothing against it. But if you don't have a profilometer and you're not checking the RA finish, then you actually have no idea what you're polishing it to. And, just it being shiny and smooth isn't good enough. And so on the Cummins, I mean, we're really trying to aim, even though kind of general accepted amount is 10 RA or less in diesel applications. I mean, especially on Cummins and stuff, because of just the architecture that they are, we do try and aim for like less than 5 RA on the surface, which just allows it to maintain that much more of an oil wedge to support it. The obviously the other standard upgrades we do is all of our Cummins we've actually always built with head stud standard, but we are actually working with um, one of our head bolt manufacturers to actually look at making a head bolt that's actually will have more clamp load than your average stud and then doesn't require hot retorque anymore or anything. We won't have those for a while, but we do believe that'll be a really good just standard upgrade to engines where it's like, it's to even to like dealers and shops that want to just do a quick head gasket job. I mean, you don't have to run the risk of like having it where head gasket prematurely fails because it wasn't a retorque done. And I know in the industry there's lots of back and forth saying that, the head gaskets or the head studs don't require hot retorques and in a lot of applications they don't, but in a 6.7 Cummins, because there's such little material for the head gasket, it does actually crush down a fair bit more on the first heat cycles. And so the factory torque to yield bolts are kind of like, I mean, not sure if it's a good example or not, but kind of like big bungee cords where that's like, they're under tension. And then as it, the engine heats and everything expands, it crushes down the gasket. So when it cools, it kind of maintains that pressure on it. But with a stud, the stud doesn't really stretch. So when the head expands, the block expands, it crushes down the gasket more. But then when it goes to cool, it's actually lost several thousandths of an inch in crush value. And a lot of the assembly lubes that, common bolt manufacturers use is more of a Loctite than it is an assembly lube. So the problem is if you don't do a hot retorque like immediately on the very first like warm up and cool down, the nut on the stud itself is actually like you have to actually overcome the friction to snap it free to torque it down. So if you wait for it to cool, they'll all just click and torque. But the problem is it didn't actually clamp down anymore. So you're actually just feeling like the resistance or the friction of the fastener more than you are actually the clamp load. Um, the not getting too in the weeds on this, but like, one of the fasteners we've actually really started using a lot the last couple of years is Optitorque. Ross over there in New York and stuff. And we like that they're, American made and stuff, but that guy's a wealth of knowledge when it comes to fasteners and stuff. And, um, like one of the examples he kind of gave is like, what, put his bolts and 10 other manufacturers bolts side to side. I mean, if you were to put like a bearing underneath the nut of the stud, all of the bolts are going to pull apart at 60, 70 foot-pounds of torque. So anyone thinking that like, oh, well, I got to 130 or 140 or 150 is largely irrelevant because it still depends more on the clamp load of the fastener. And a lot of it's just the friction you're feeling. So not to get too sidetracked, but again, we're still for the time being, upgrading all of our engines standard with head studs and everything. And then the final thing was, we were looking at it's like, all right, well, we were nervous about, like one, I mean, we're trying to also get a remanufactured engine at a affordable cost for customers because I mean we're all about, how do we offer the best value overall, which is obviously like, a reasonable, affordable price, to repair and get the vehicle back on the road, but also offer like, North America's most comprehensive warranty. And so because we're a little bit nervous both on the cost of, buying replacement camshafts and, the brand new lifters that are ridiculously expensive, is we also decided to make our own lifters as well and just move it back to a flat tap conversion as well. And then we're just utilizing the older design 18 and down camshafts, which, again, if a customer did want to like upgrade to a camshaft later, the nice thing is all the older Cummins ones that used in 5967s, you can still use in these new ones. And with that, we have to obviously go back to the adjustable rockers and everything and new push rods and stuff. But by going back to the flat tappet design just right out of the get-go, that kind of allowed us to say it's like, hey, what, we're finally ready to, release this engine and stand behind it for our full warranty and be confident that people aren't going to have issues with it.
Hey, Diesel fans, we wanted to let you know that our friends over at Kershaw Knives have a 20% off your entire cart discount code for you. If you go to kershaw.kaiusa.com, use code TDP2520, get you 20% off your entire order. They got a bunch of different choices for blade steel, blade shape, different handle designs, different opening mechanisms. So if you're in the market for a new knife for EDC or hunting, fishing, around the job site, around the house, they've got you covered with a bunch of different choices designed to meet any budget. We really appreciate them offering that discount code just for you guys. So if you're in the market, head on over to kershaw.kaiusa.com and use code TDP2520 and get 20% off your entire cart. Oh, it's really cool to be able to offer someone the ability to go back to something that was proven for decades with, the way that the engines were set up. That was one of the things that I think made, from a Cummins owner's perspective, so nice is like the camshafts you mentioned that have been out there forever, and you could be able to use that in a newer truck, or limiting potential failures because they're very stout motors, and that's what they're built on. A lot of people buy those trucks just simply because it has a Cummins engine in it, and so I think being able to have that option is really cool. But then also it gives you so much freedom, like when you're doing an engine build. Maybe you do want to change the camshaft, maybe you do have a different turbo setup and you want to take advantage of it. You have this whole aftermarket support that's already built in there to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I mean, in some cases it's like, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel or whatever, and it's kind of, deferring back to like, well, this is the setup and technology that we know worked and everything. But and I know that there are some aftermarket, options out there for like there's a couple different options out there for customers. And I mean they're all great for guys that, the engine hasn't gone already, but we had to really look at like what can we do, because like there's a lot of times we're still building like 1,200-1,400 engines a year sort of thing, and whenever we release a new model of engine is we have to have good scalability and the ability to actually deliver to the demand. And we've been getting a lot of requests and stuff for a while, and we've been building quite a few of these hybrid conversions to build our core bank. So and that's when we just looked at it as yeah, like what can we do kind of in-house internally or whatever that kind of solves this, because we are starting to kind of pivot a little bit from traditional ways we used to remanufacture, and we're, just kind of getting to the size where we do need to start looking for kind of more made in-house solutions and stuff, as opposed to just sourcing them from additional aftermarket places. And, and with that too, as it's also look at the engine as like, it's not just about, are we just selling the engines now? I mean, for many years as we were kind of like trying to perfect our manufacturing processes and stuff, we actually had stopped like doing general machine work for local companies and stuff, and we had stopped doing a lot of part sales and stuff such as cylinder heads and everything, because we were struggling to just keep up to our own demand to build engines. But as we've kind of increased our capacity more and have the ability to take on more and more, we're getting back into like so with these 19 up Cummins, not only are we releasing like these long block engines right away, but we'll also have like a complete line of, cylinder heads from, stock replacements to performance ones. One of the challenges that we faced on the 19 and up is, even, there's a lot of front gear cases that are broken on them, and they're ridiculously expensive for new ones from Mopar or Ram or anything now. So we also started making our own billet front gear cases and stuff. So that way it's like, because a lot of them, sometimes it's simple where even like the power steering brackets get broken off. And if you're looking for those covers right now, I mean, they're all in like nationwide back order a lot of times. So we're like, all right, well, we need to have a made in-house solution for that and start making, the billet front gear cases, and you know, those will probably even start selling individual soon as well. But again, we want to make sure that we had enough to cover our own, you know, initial engine supply first.
That's really interesting. I know, and I've heard for years with back orders on parts how it's not just like if it's a brand new truck under warranty and you got to wait for something, it also affects the aftermarket so substantially. And I think that's been one of the really interesting parts of following diesel for so long is, like you mentioned, the scalability and growth and how that's evolved over the years to be able to now find these like national or international, you know, solutions. This problem of trying to find a front cover, you
Mhm.
can now look internally to be able to design, remedy the issue, and then other people can take advantage of it. There might be somebody out there that's been waiting for one, and you know, in the future they can call you guys up and be able to get it. Do you think as you approach these solutions with newer engines, the growth that you've had before, the processes like we've talked about ISO certification and some of the other things that you and DFC Diesel have done, it's really preparing you guys for the future to be able to support these trucks. And as the engines get more advanced, the power gets more advanced, people start doing more advanced things, making bigger power levels. They're going to start to break stuff.
Mhm.
And how does the growth of the company, the evolution of it, tie into, like, if I go onto your website and I see this, you know, 2019 6.7 long block that I need, how is that all factored together to be able to offer these complete solutions? Like, was it specifically, did you try to, did you have this in mind to build the company this way, or did it sort of just happen where, you know, you're trying to keep up with demand and then all of a sudden you're like, well, I need this part, I think we can build it, all right, now we got it? Like, how did it all fit together?
Yeah, I'm a pretty naturally good problem solver and stuff, and I mean, you know, remanufacturing engines, I mean, is going to give you a lot of problems to solve. um, you know, over the years, like, you know, when I first started out, I mean, again, I actually just thought as like, you know, maybe I could have like a couple of part-time staff giving me a hand, have summers off, and typical entrepreneur's dream. But you know, every year that passes, you know, we get more opportunities, and I mean, it is exciting and stuff too. I mean, like not just myself, but I mean, all the company owners you have on here. I mean, we're all enthusiasts. We enjoy it. It is what we do, and I mean, there's challenges to every business and stuff. You know, I do find, you know, I'm sure this could be up for debate or whatever, depending on who you're talking to. But I mean, I would still probably say that, you know, engine manufacturing is probably one of the most challenging things you could ever imagine doing in the diesel industry. Like I'd put it ahead of manufacturing new parts, manufacturing transmissions, manufacturing injectors, turbos, you name it, just because you have you still have the most expensive piece that takes the longest amount of time to swap out. And, you know, you're reliant on something that ultimately has considerable amount of variables from, you know, dozens of other companies' products that go onto it that they can all contribute to the cause of failure of the engine, plus just general servicing, plus so many other things. And there's so many things that have to work and that you have to be able to kind of requalify, um, you know, and then ultimately like, you know, stand behind it with a great warranty and stuff. I mean, you know, I definitely know over the years, like you'll get people that, you know, they have, you know, like we have warranties just like every other company and stuff. And, you know, in some cases, you know, have it, you know, I know everyone's upset if something like that happens, but I mean, ultimately we're here to like, you know, stand behind it to the best of our ability. I mean, we can't, you know, it's not 100% no fault warranty. There are limitations to things, but you know, in some cases, like you'll get someone that once you give a 5 year warranty, I mean, the expectation's that much higher of you than any other manufacturer. Because if someone offers, let's say, like a 2 year warranty and it fails at 3 years, the customer kind of already has in their head, oh, I'm off warranty. But I mean, it fails at 4 years, and you know, whether it's warrantable or not, you know, if it's warrantable, great. But then, you know, the expectation is, well, I want to turn around immediately. Um, and then oftentimes, like even in the last 5 years, because of COVID, I mean, we've seen labor rates go up exponentially at diesel repair shops. Oftentimes, where the labor to install the engine is more than what the engine's worth. And so there's also this, again, expectation that if something goes wrong, people ultimately want to know someone's accountable for it. And we've definitely put ourselves kind of, I guess you could say, at the crosshairs of kind of like pioneering kind of like this, the just the coverage that we have offered. We increased coverages the last couple of years and stuff, but um, and I'm kind of getting into the off track a little bit. I guess one big thing is that I'm trying to actually focus on right now is how do we stick with the late model engines as much as possible, because as an engine manufacturer, it's incredibly hard, and we're actually already considering um, discontinuing some models of engines like our 12 valves, 24 valves. We're actually even considering discontinuing our 6 liters, just because, again, there's that delicate balance between how do we offer a great product with a great warranty at a reasonable price. And, and to balance all three of those things, there's always got to be some trade-off. And so as these engines age, they get to the point where, like, I'll use, I think we've talked about this as 6.4s before, but still the best example for this is, if in 2014 when we started building huge volumes, like hundreds of them a year of 6.4s, I mean, we used to be able to like pretty much just buy a core for like $700 for like a long block, and then you really had to bore it, surface it, polish the crank. The cylinder heads weren't all cracked. You could put seats and guides in them, new valves and stuff. You could just swap over the front cover after painting and prepping it and stuff, and generally there was your rebuilt engine. Now it's like, well, we got to pressure test the block when it comes back as a core because they crack on the head studs. We're probably replacing about 80% of cylinder heads with new cast. We got to bore it, surface it, mainline it. We have to, you know, it's always new oversized pistons. You're putting sleeves in the block. We got to grind almost every crank because they're bowed sometimes, or, too much run out. We got to either weld up and remachine the front covers, buy new front covers, new lifters, new push rods, new valve bridges, new rocker arms. The gas kits have like tripled in price for them. I mean, pistons have gone up, rings have gone up, bearings have gone up. So an engine that, I used to sell for $7,000, $8,000 and, 2013, 14 for like $7,000, $8,000 Canadian is like $15,000 now. And up here in Canada, because the trucks are so rusted out, they're not really worth that now. And so it's kind of getting to the point where, we don't want to lower our quality or standards just to get engines out the door. And so, um, we're considering stepping away from some of the older stuff. And, we're not saying we won't build them at all, but it'll probably be a custom rebuild where, if a customer did want it, we'll send in your core and we'll go through it. We'll give you a proper assessment how to rebuild it properly, and they can make the decision whether it's worth that for them. But I definitely say the future of DFC to continue offering a 5-year warranty and everything else is how do we build more of the more late model engines and everything where, the quality of the cores and the cranks and the heads are still better. And then we're taking some of our experiences of like the 6 liter 6.4s and trying to apply that to saying, it's like, all right, well, how can we even start getting like working with some of the foundries that actually cast some of the brand new castings for, the Cummins or for whatever else. Like, if we can get up to the volume we need, now we can start buying more new castings and inserting them in, and it's actually still OE quality parts, and it's not, because again, like we've definitely used some castings that are sourced from obviously other countries like, China and everything else. And, some are great quality and some are not. So, um, you know, it, it I know right now, especially the tariffs going on and everything's all about, buy American as much as possible. And some of these tariffs are really impacting the cost of everyone acquiring parts and stuff. So it's also too where can we get these parts where, because ultimately, like, America can't do all this stuff overnight, so we still have to find third party relationships elsewhere. But then it's like, well, where in the world can we turn to get those, where we can get, like, factory quality castings and gasket kits and all the other parts and stuff, and then still get them here at a reasonable price for these engines.
Makes a lot of sense. We have a Discord server, which is like where a bunch of podcast listeners that can get together, talk with each other. They can ask me questions and stuff. It's a cool place to hang out. And it was actually about Power Strokes, but these two guys were talking about it. And this one guy's a 7.3 that he's done some upgrades on, and he loves it. And he was giving advice to somebody that was interested in either a new 6.7 or an older 7.3. And he's like, I love my 7.3. It's great, but it doesn't compare to my work truck, my 6.7 Power Stroke. I can't build this 7.3 into what this 6.7 Power Stroke is. So if you're looking to, he was looking to tow and have it be a daily driver, he was suggesting the 6.7 Power Stroke. So that makes a lot of sense to me. I think in a bigger picture way is, like you take these older trucks, they're not being made anymore. Their numbers dwindle every year. And there's always going to be that core enthusiast group that will spend no matter what the amount is, they will spend the money to keep it going and maintenance it, but that isn't a huge number. And I can see where it becomes or could become an issue where, what if you're selling a $20,000 long block for a truck that's worth, $8,000?
Yeah.
A couple people might want to do it or would do it, but how do you still propose that value to be able to do it? And it's also really interesting to me too. I'm sure it is for you, having been in diesel for so long, is that transition between generations of trucks. Like, to me, in my head, like a good, like solid, reliable, not too expensive truck to me is like a third gen 5.9. Well, they're not inexpensive anymore. They command a lot of money, especially if they're clean. Well, for people younger than me, it might be that 2019 Cummins. It might be that 10 to 14. It might be something like that. So as that evolution grows as a company, you have to grow with it, as well. So that it makes a lot of sense what you mentioned, especially in the context of that conversation that I was reading the other day about 7.3 versus 6.7 Power Stroke, and why one is more feasible than the other.
Yeah, and I mean, again too, I mean, if you ever want like an apples to apples comparison too or whatever, it's like, people talk about how long the 7.3s lasted. It's like, all right, well, let's actually have a good comparable and take a brand new 2025 Ford Power Stroke that makes 500 horsepower, detune it to 230 horse, and never tow a trailer that weighs over 10,000 pounds and see how long it lasts.
Yeah.
It's like, it's all relative, because that's the thing back in like, the 90s or whatever. I mean, the fifth wheels back then really, 10, 12,000 pounds max. I mean, even what people towed and moved was nowhere near as heavy as it is today. Like, I mean, now they're rating trucks up to like what, 30, 40,000 pounds. Like, it's what semis are supposed to be towing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's another factor in it, as well as you take like say a 7.3 or 12 valve, and if you want to have 550 horsepower, 1,200 foot-pounds of torque, you're going to spend a decent amount of money, not even just on the engine. You're going to spend on the transmission, on other components. And then you're still not going to have a truck that's technically rated to tow 35,000 pounds or 40,000 pounds, to be able to do it. So I think that's exciting to hear the focus that DFC is going to have on these newer engines, because one day they're going to be the 7.3s. There might be a while from now, but they're going to be like the 7.3s that people look back to with nostalgia. And I think being ahead of that, currently is great for those owners. Like, we talked about the lifters and retrofitting and the head studs you had mentioned here in the future. This stuff didn't exist 10 years ago. You were just kind of limited, to what was out there, what could be done. And then as we watch the supply of cores, or how many good cores can you get anymore, or the parts get discontinued at the OEM level, and how you're able to now maybe have the conversation of saying, can we get these castings from the place that casts them for the OEMs? Can we incorporate this into the aftermarket? It's so different than it used to be.
Well, and I mean, let's get to the point too where, I mean, it's like so much of our knowledge is based on errors and loss and everything else, whatever. I mean, I wish they could all be based on great experiences and everything, but it's like even the companies that build some of the highest horsepower diesels out there, I mean, they didn't get there without blowing a lot of stuff up along the way. And we didn't get to where we did without, because like for us, I mean, what's been interesting, it's really interesting to kind of see the different market demographics in Canada and the US, because I would say up here in Canada, as we'll typically see engine failures about 3 to 5 years ahead of what they're seeing in large volume in the States. And, you know, at the end of the day, it's like -40 is a lot harder on stuff than 120 degrees Fahrenheit. And so it does seem to just have it where we've always had the opportunity to, like, start seeing, all right, well, what is failing, for what reasons, and everything. We can kind of start, like starting to develop and everything else, whatever. We don't have to wait until they're 15 years old before we start getting really heavy into the volume of them, and then start working out some of the quirks and everything else as we go. But even the last 4 or 5 years, I mean, we like during COVID and stuff too. I mean, everyone was turning anywhere they could to get whatever product was possible, and we actually had turned to a bunch of American manufacturers for some of the product for our engines, and we actually had a lot worse experiences with the parts than what we had traditionally had from stuff that came overseas. And so with that, we took the knowledge that we learned of, like, what was the issue with those particular parts and stuff. And then it's like, all right, well, how can we start sourcing these things elsewhere? But based on the failures that we saw, how do we actually look for like the same common failure points and then request better ones to be made? Because I think one of the most frustrating things that I've had over the years is sometimes you'll go out and we'll actually spend more money than what we'd normally spend on traditional product. So it's not about necessarily saving money. It was always about like getting the best quality product we can, and sometimes we've actually spent considerable more money for um normally we spent considerably more money to get, like, domestically made parts, and actually had a lot worse quality issues. So as much as I'd love to have it where it's like, it's all, manufactured in Canada or manufactured in the USA, or, like somewhat domestically, um, there's a lot of pretty amazing companies worldwide or whatever that can make stuff and can make stuff a lot better than what you're used to here. So it's just a matter of like, how do we find them and how do we perfect it? Like, we'll around the same time we'll be releasing these 2019 engines. We do also hope that we'll be able to start releasing, we've just been working on even creating our own gasket kits and everything too, and then try to take the best of what we've seen from, multiple different kits across the spectrum and stuff, and say, well, these are the type of gaskets that work best in this application, these ones here. And in some cases, these gasket kits, I'm going to package them up even with, if I'm not able to locate the OE manufacturer of, let's say, front and rear main seals, then we'll build the kits where it's like, hey, we sourced out all these other intrinsic parts and pieces from all over, packaged them together, and then, hey, they come with an OE front and rear seal because we know that's generally what works the best. Because we've been burnt a lot too. I mean, again, I'm not getting in here to say names of manufacturers, but we've had kits before where, you know, we'll be buying large volumes of gasket kits, and all of a sudden we'll get like, over the course of a couple of months, we'll get like 50 rear main seal leaks. And at the end of the day, that manufacturer's like, there's nothing wrong with their seal. And we switch back to like an OE one or a different brand, and the problem goes away. And unfortunately, it's like, to the customer's thing, it's like, oh, I had a problem with the DFC engine. But it's like, well, we bought a part, we were having great success. Something obviously changed with our manufacturer. We stood behind it, we fixed it. And, the big thing is, it's like, well, we learned from it, and how do we make sure to watch for these things in the future, not let them happen again?
Hey, Diesel fans, let me ask you something. Who's got eyes on your online life? You probably think it's just you, but it's not. There's shady data brokers, advertisers, even your internet provider. They're all watching you. Every site you visit, every order you make, every video you watch, it's all tracked, stored, and sold. And in the diesel world, we know privacy matters. You wouldn't leave your shop wide open for anyone to walk in, right? So why do it online? That's where ExpressVPN comes in. It reroutes everything you do on the internet through secure encrypted servers. That means your IP address, which is your digital license plate, is hidden. Nobody can use it to track you, target you with ads, or worse. And here's the kicker. ExpressVPN works on all your devices. Phones, tablets, desktops, even your smart TVs. It's one click and you're locked in. Up to 8 devices at once, so your whole family's covered. Plus, if you're like me and you hate when Netflix blocks certain shows because of where you live, ExpressVPN lets you watch shows and movies from other countries. It's like having a giant toolbox of content that's usually locked up. Right now, Diesel Podcast listeners can get 4 extra months of ExpressVPN for free when you sign up for a 2-year package. Just go to expressvpn.com/diesel. That's expressvpn.com/diesel. Protect your privacy, protect your family, and take back control of your internet. I bet that goes back to that complexity you talked about of how engines are probably the most complex part of anything built in the aftermarket. You've talked about it with us before about how even OEM replacement parts can vary in quality. I've seen shop owners get like a brand new part from one of the big three and they'll post a picture of it and you're like, how did this get past like quality control? How did it end up in the box and at this guy's shop? And having to have systems in place to catch that. And then I think also with the manufacturing you talked about and the ability to do in-house stuff, maybe it is better and it works best if it's something that you can make yourself, like you talked about the Cummins front covers, or maybe there's other components. And there's just so many variables there that I think being able to trust your experience with a number of engines that you've built and seen and worked on and the experience in the industry, I would want to rely on that. And this goes for anything. It goes for turbos, transmissions. It goes for things not even related to diesel trucks. Like I want to rely on somebody's experience. Which gaskets work, which head studs work, which whatever components work. Like that's what I want as a potential customer.
And the other thing is too, is when, whenever people are doing research about what it is they want, I mean, like, I think all people to a certain degree get fairly tribal in their own way. I mean, they'll find a couple of brands they like and, to them, they're like, well, this is the best brand and everything else. And, I've always tried keeping an open mind over time. I mean, just like I'm sure some people have had, some like a warranty experience with our engines or something that they didn't like, however. And I mean, we ourselves, like we have warranty experiences with vendors and everything else, but I think it comes back to be is, I think the thing I always have a hard time getting over personally is if I go to a manufacturer and clearly there's something wrong with the part that we got, and there's like quite overwhelming evidence that there's like a problem with it. If their stance is like our parts carry no warranty, we're not giving you any warranty, we're not standing behind anything. Well, there's one where the relationship ends. But if you go to someone, it's like look at a problem. It's like, all right, well, how do we come up with a solution to work together? And I mean, a lot of times, like people have to realize that in all industries and everything too is like it is important to maintain good relationships, and there's a big difference between a zero sum game and a non-zero sum game. Zero sum game is like someone directly has to lose for the other person to win, and a non-zero sum game is like, well, neither person necessarily has to win or lose to still kind of have a positive outcome sort of thing. And so to go after that non-zero sum game with both customers and repair shops and stuff, it's always about, all right, well, look at the situation. Could we have done any better? If it's a gray area, I mean, we've always done this for years, is if we have a warranty come back and it's a gray area where we can't specifically say, well, this is exactly what caused it and this is why it's 100% not warrantable, we've just deferred on the side of the customer and taken care of it. So I mean, I've likely warrantied a lot of stuff that I shouldn't have over the years. But I do feel that in general, most of the time, that's why, we have the customer base we do and stuff. And I have found over the years too that, I think, again, going back to the engines being the most challenging thing or whatever, is like people go out and they'll buy engines from us and they'll buy engines from 4 or 5 other companies. And in general, I mean, I would like to think that most of the time, even if they didn't have something happen or they weren't as happy as they wanted to be with something we did, they go out and they deal elsewhere. And when they realize how much less coverage or how much less things are actually taken care of in other circumstances, that they always end up coming back, whoever, and purchasing again. And we always want to earn our customers' business back as much as we possibly can, anyways. So
I think the interaction is important too. Like I've noticed it. I don't know when this changed. I don't know if it was in 2020 and on, but like, and I'm not even saying this like about diesel trucks. This is like other consumer products or things I might buy. Is the level of customer service has changed. Whereas I think in the past, a lot of companies would strive towards, Are you happy? If you're having an issue, how can I fix it? I find it more difficult now. Um,
Mhm.
with a couple of recent things I bought where they weren't perfect, and it's just such a different process. But the ones that stand out to me, like where I become a loyal customer of something, is when I get a response and I get a sense that there's some urgency to take care of it. It doesn't have to be instant, doesn't have to be necessarily even fast, but I just want to know that the company cares. And then that, as a consumer, yeah, I had a problem or an issue or something bothered me about it, and I was, kind of quote inconvenienced by it. But their service post sale is what will keep me going back, and a lot of times has.
Mhm.
Do you think that's a large part of it, as well as just the approach to issues that pop up? Or maybe they're not even issues, it could just be a concern somebody has and they want to ask, and like the people on the phone engaging and that part of it, because I think it's almost as just as important as the part. Like, not in actually making the truck run, but like as far as a business and a relationship with customers. Like, I know a lot of great products out there that are awesome, and the companies have horrible customer service reputations. So like,
Mhm.
you go into it knowing you better not
Yeah.
have a problem, because they're not fun to
Yeah.
deal with.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say it's actually a pretty complex subject. I mean, and there is no one right, easy answer to it. I mean, like even just talking at company level in general and stuff is like, I mean, I personally know what my expectations are and how I would love to be perceived in the industry and everything else. And sometimes you'll even have staff members that you hire them and you think they're doing a good job, and then you find out, why would you tell a customer that, or why did you say that? Like, I mean, that's the thing too, is it's really tough because sometimes, like, and all company owners struggle from this, is like, you get busy and you hire people, and depending on how well you can onboard them and everything else, or even just the level of care or concern that people have, is directly correlated to how good a customer service they give. And I mean, like, the problem is like, I could have someone working for me that gives really bad customer service, and I can fire them over it, but it doesn't change how that customer perceives the company later on.
Yeah.
I do think what's really changed the last 5 years is like in my lifetime, I never remember used vehicles prices going up.
Yeah.
And that's the first time I ever saw that. And so I think part of the reason what's really changed the last 5 years is like we've been trying to do the best we can to manage people's expectations before they ever even buy from us or anything else, by being as transparent as we can to let them know, like, look, this is what's covered, this is what's not. These are all things that we've done to the best of our ability. We are still putting together a whole bunch of pieces from other manufacturers that ultimately we get no warranty on ourselves, and yet we're saying, like we buy a part and then we're saying, hey, we're going to warranty that part for 5 years, but the manufacturer's like, as soon as we lose sight of it, it's out of warranty. um and so we're taking that on, and that's part of like the challenge as a engine manufacturer. But one thing I've just noticed is like, a lot of people in general, I mean, when money starts getting tighter, and because things get more expensive, is normally reasonable people start becoming more unreasonable. And the way they become unreasonable is their expectations for what they think is covered should get increases more and more. And I mean, prior to COVID, in 2020, I mean, because I think like part of our warranty process is a customer has to, submit his their original invoice with like where they got the engine installed and everything else, because it helps verify the mileage and all the other things on it. But like, up until 2019, 2020, I would say the average repair cost on most of the engines that we were selling, so including the price of the motor that's marked up to retail to the customer and the install and all the accessories, was most of the time it was anywhere from about 18 to 25 grand. Nowadays, it's like most people getting engines in their trucks, like we're getting these invoices coming in where the invoice to the customer is like 35, 40, 45, $50,000. And, and the problem is like our engine's like $12,000 of that. But if there's anything that goes wrong with that engine, the customer comes to us and says, I just spent $50,000 in your motor. So the expectation's far higher about what you're going to do about it. And so I think just the perceived notion of how expensive everything has gotten has made it where, you know, people are already putting out so much money. They want to know that, whoever they're buying it from, they're the reputable company, they're going to stand behind it. But I mean, whether I'm shooting myself in the foot on this or not, however, I mean, it's like, myself and all the other engine manufacturers out there and, all the turbo and transmission and injector companies, like we all have limited warranties. There's only so much that we can do if something goes wrong because none of us would be in business if we just had a 100% no fault cover whatever it is type thing. I mean, I've had people too where, they broke down and they didn't even contact us. And like we had a Canadian customer one time, they broke down somewhere in the States and he paid to hotshot his truck and trailer back from the States instead of taking it to a local repair shop. And then he's like, well, I paid $25,000 in freight to get my truck back here. And I'm like, no one told you to do that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I can see the complexity of it, and I think you're right with the expectations, how that has changed because of the price of used vehicles. It used to be like I mentioned, that third gen, you used to be able to find them at a decent price with lower mileage a long time ago, where now I see
yeah.
them on 35, some of them 40, $45,000. And I'm like,
Mhm.
that's double the price that it used to be. But then I'm going to spend probably, well, I don't know the exact percentage, but I'm going to spend more on the parts now. The labor, like I remember when labor at $130 an hour was a lot. That's
Yeah.
not anymore. That's like nothing. It's probably close to 200, probably over $200 an hour just at the shop level. So everything's getting more expensive. And I think that's where it comes back to really, like if I needed an engine and I said, like I emailed you and I said, hey, Matt, I need a 5.9 long block.
Mhm.
The second question I'd ask you is, have you guys worked with anyone near me? Do you have a
Mhm.
relationship with somebody? Can you suggest where I go? Because I think lining up the installer and the manufacturer, if they have some sort of relationship or something where, you could send me, I want them on the same team. So if
Mhm.
there are any issues or anything that happens, you guys have that relationship built already. Do you think that factors into it as well as like picking the right installer if you can and finding a place that is either experienced with this or you might have a relationship where that can smooth the process over a bit?
Oh, 100% it does. I mean, and this has probably been one of the biggest challenges we've been facing over the last couple of years is, um, like obviously, like we have a pretty big distribution network. We have a bunch of very large customers in the States, sell our engines to thousands of different diesel repair shops across North America. But I think where things get kind of lost in translation is like when we sell an engine to a distributor and that distributor sells it to a wholesale shop and the wholesale shop sells it to the customer. Well, if there's a warranty concern and if we don't have a relationship with that wholesale shop, we're still talking about something that's worth 10 or $15,000. And so we've had to, let's say, return the engine back to Canada first to assess it to even find out if it's warrantable or not. And that in itself can add a couple of weeks of extra time, each way sort of thing. Which again is very frustrating to the customer. So if we have a shop that let's say we do have a relationship with and we know, you know, we've bent the rules a lot more where we will ship an engine, upfront as a replacement. And I know a lot of shops, let's say they're like, well, this is why I buy engines from Ford is because if I have a problem, they just ship me a new engine right away. But they're missing the key detail that's like, well, you have an account with Ford, you know, when you order that engine originally, you ordered it from the Ford account. They're gonna invoice it out to you at full value again, and then when you return it, they'll credit it eventually. Um, and then if there's any labor payout, they're gonna credit that to their account. With us, it's very different because sometimes we don't have a direct relationship with the shop, and so it's like, well, unfortunately, this is still a kind of a property rights issue sort of thing, and we have to get the engine back to get it assessed because like that was the thing that I overlooked, in 2013 when I came out with a 5-year, 100,000 mile warranty is, we also receive a lot of engines back that are not warrantable. Like they weren't serviced properly. They were used for an application that they weren't designed for. They have it where, injector failed and took out a piston. They had debris go through the motor. They dusted the motor. They ran out of oil. Like, there's any number of things that can cause it. And so, it to just ship an engine up front to a shop that you don't know is a lot more concerning or whatever. So sometimes we've had to do it where we have to take a deposit against the engine or whatever else. But as we've developed more and more relationships with shops, I mean, we're definitely trying to do our best to like, how do we get the customer back up and running as quick as possible? But one of the examples I give to customers sometimes is like, if you went to Best Buy and you bought TV and you take it home and you have a problem with the TV, you can't go back to Best Buy and have them give you a new TV without returning the old one first. And if that's like a $1,500 TV, how are we expected to do it with a $15,000 engine? Um, so yeah, definitely. I mean, we obviously love recommending shops we deal with and everything, and it definitely does make the process go a lot better because there's also that level of trust there too. I mean, if they've been buying our engines, we've dealt with them before, then if they're telling us, hey, like, what we have like the most common thing I think anyone would ever have with an engine is maybe like a seal or a gasket leak or something. And again, some of them we supply, but we don't install. So then it's still narrowing down. All right, well, are we supplying a new gasket? Is that on the fault of the shop, whatever else? But um, part of the warranty process is also making sure that we properly assess the problem. And then, we always use Mitchell time for like, what's the estimated repair for that? Because and that's actually to protect the end customer a lot as well, because there are some shops, not a lot, but some that, you know, they just feel that a job takes 40 hours that like a competent mechanic should be able to do in 10. And so if they want to charge 40 hours, that's not adding value to the customer or to DFC or anyone else. So, it's about keeping things fair and reasonable for all parties involved to get the repair done, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think like through this conversation, I realize just how, and I look at it from a truck owner's perspective, is it's not just as simple as I need an engine, any engine in the US or Canada is going to work for my application. They're all the same. Just throw them in, swap them out, you're back on the road.
Mm.
There's a lot that goes into it. You went through it, with the 2019 plus 6.7 Cummins and different hard parts that factor into it. And then also different quality steps that factor in. But then also, what are my expectations? How do I set those correctly? And then, once you get it into the truck and how do I follow that? So it's a process to think about and factor into a decision that someone's making. I just read so many things from people that aren't as experienced or haven't consumed as much content. They're kind of new to diesel, and they get in these situations where they buy a motor from someone they don't know that said they could rebuild it and it's cheaper, it's half the price, and they get it and it turns into this nightmare. And they find like me or shops or whoever it is because they're desperate and they're in a really bad spot. So I always think about that with like conversations like this or any of the other ones that I do, is how can I talk with a professional in this industry, give them some tips, give them some information so that they can avoid it and make the right decision before they ever get to that point. That's what I love to do about the podcast. That's why I ask you a lot of those kind of questions. For some of these things you mentioned that are coming up with the new engines, the headsets, some other cool stuff you guys are working on, is the best place to be able to find that, like, go dfcdiesel.com, follow you guys on social media. You guys have announcements when these things hit the market.
Yeah, like I obviously covered quite a few different products. I mean, to some degree, I mean, we do have the engines available already, but we're going to be like really starting to push them probably sometime, probably September, October latest. I'd say a lot of the stuff we'll be able to start releasing in more volume. So in the short term, it's like, yeah, I mean, contacting us directly. I think we're a little bit behind in our website. I mean, I still think looks pretty good, but it's actually 10 years old at this point. And so, I mean, we are in the works of like updating that and stuff too. So I don't think that we have the 19 or up there. So probably best would be to reach out to us directly and see what we currently have available. But I think from the time this podcast launches to need a little bit more time for some of the parts, but they're well in the process and ready to be released here soon. And the nice thing is like when we do release especially the long block, we're actually going to be releasing a version of the short block long block. We're going to have our core series engine, which is kind of like our our more budget friendly one because there's a fewer components on it, and it's a more limited warranty on it. It's a 1 year unlimited mileage versus our 5 year 160 or 5 year 100,000 mile. Um, but it's a lot more cost effective. And then obviously we have our speed of air series that's available in it as well. So that one's still always going to be the one that offers the most value to the end customer.
Very cool. It's exciting to see what you guys are working on and to be able to chat with you and learn about it. So I'll look forward to these products hitting the market. Maybe in the future get some feedback from you on some of the speed of air stuff. I know we talked about that before. I think earlier this year, and people are really kind of curious about that. And then what you guys are working on. I think the innovation and the way that you guys approach solving these engine issues is really unique, and people look forward to it. So it was cool to chat with you today, Matt. I always appreciate it and love seeing the innovation you guys are putting out.
Yeah, thanks for having me back. I know it's been a busy summer so far.
Don't forget, Diesel fans, make sure and head on over to Kershaw.kaiusa.com. Use code TDP2520 to get 20% off your entire cart. If you're in the market for a new knife for hunting, fishing, EDC, something around the job site, around the house, they got you covered with a bunch of different choices for blade steel, blade shape, handle design, different opening mechanisms, and their whole lineup's designed to meet any budget that you might have. We really appreciate them offering that discount code just for Diesel Podcast listeners. So again, if you're in the market, head on over to Kershaw.kaiusa.com. Use code TDP2520 and get 20% off your order. Also want to give a shout out to some of our Patreon supporters, Tyler Lowen at 23 Diesel, Robert, Cutter Up Rob, all of our other Patreon supporters, all of you who subscribe on YouTube and podcast apps. Follow us on social media. We appreciate all your support here in year 9 of the Diesel Podcast and look forward to bringing you more of the content that you want to hear in 2025. Till next time, keep the shiny side up.